Welcome back to Season 3 of Titans of Food Service. I'm your host, Nick Portillo, and I'm thrilled to continue our journey around the country. I'm calling it Across America in 50 Weeks. That's right, I'm doing 50 states in 50 weeks where I interview a titan of food service from every state in the country. And this week, where are we going? I'm going to Maine, the beautiful state of Maine. I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Munz. So Chris, he's the Vice President of Growth at Voosh. Nick, what's Voosh? Great question. Voosh offers a suite of powerful tools to help restaurant owners make data-driven decisions and increase their bottom line. With AI-powered insights, real-time review, and dispute management and targeted promotions, Voosh makes it easy to manage your P&L or profit and loss statement and maximize your success on third-party marketplaces. Those could be third-party marketplaces could be things like DoorDash or Uber Eats. So in our interview, Chris and I, we're going to dive into the adoption of third-party delivery companies, things like companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, things like that, and how specifically discuss how he and his company is helping restaurants better manage these systems to increase their profits and then also enhance customer retention and loyalty. A lot of restaurant operators out there, deal with a lot of their consumers now. As much as they do come in maybe to their brick and mortar location, they're buying online. And so Chris and his team has found a better way to help manage those third-party delivery companies so that it benefits the restaurant. So really cool, really insightful. But before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to take a moment to explore the unique food service scene in the beautiful state of Maine. So Chris and I laugh in the episode. I've never been to Maine. It's like living in Orange County, California. It's got to be the furthest state from where I'm located. But I told him next time if I ever go to Maine, I'm gonna make sure to reach out to him. So Maine, it's known for its picturesque coastline and rich maritime history. Its food service scene is deeply influenced by its natural surroundings, and you'll hear a little bit about this when I talk with Chris. The state is famous for its seafood, particularly, that's a hard word to say, particularly, anyway, you get the gist. Lobster, which is celebrated in dishes like lobster rolls and lobster bisque. Maine's culinary landscape also includes a thriving farm-to-table movement with a focus on locally sourced ingredients and sustainable practices. So funny enough, after I finished the episode with Chris, he goes, "All right, Nick, you know where I'm heading next?" I was like, "No, I don't." He says, "I'm going fishing." So it is deeply entrenched in their community out there in the beautiful state of Maine. So from bustling seafood shacks to elegant fine dining establishments, Maine offers a diverse and delicious food service experience that reflects its rugged coastal charm. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Chris. All right, Chris, how are you, man? Welcome to the Titans of Food Service podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So tell me, I know we talked a little bit about you're in Maine, and you weren't necessarily born and raised in Maine, but you moved there just over 20 years ago?
Yeah, a little over 20 years ago, about 28 total. Lived in 3 different parts of the state, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't live any other place. It's where people come to vacation, and I get to vacation all the time, so you can't go wrong there.
Yeah, and you're into mapping, you were saying?
Yeah, so I came here because I have a degree in recreation. It's one of the oldest guide entities. Got my Maine guide license, but realized that it was tough to start a business as a guide, and I was a young guy and ended up working for a company called DeLorme Mapping Company,
Okay.
which has the world's largest rotating globe in its lobby. And
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it was amazing. It's in Yarmouth, Maine. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's really cool. It's called Eartha. And I got to work there during the heyday of when we were doing digital maps. They were like the first company to put digital maps on CD-ROM.
Wow.
Yeah, and got into GIS and satellite photography, and did some really, really interesting stuff, around maps and understanding spatial relationships.
So you're an outdoors guy. You like being outside. That's your thing.
That is my thing for
I,
sure.
I love it. I would imagine Maine as well. I mean, what's the climate like in Maine? I mean, do you have 4 seasons? I don't I candidly, I've never been to Maine. I think the farthest to the Northeast I've been, I mean, I've been to New York many times. I've done New Jersey, but I've never made it up to I made it to the New England's, to Massachusetts, but never to Maine.
Right on. Well, you got to just keep going, right?
Just keep going.
Just keep going. Yeah, I mean, the joke that I always tell, that always gets a little chuckle, is that there's really two seasons in Maine. There's winter and Fourth of July, and see, and it there is some truth to it, but it's nice year round. It's just it's a wild and wonderful place, and I know that's the West Virginia's moniker, but it's definitely a nice place. It's a great place to live. Um, there's not that many people that live here. The most populous city is Portland, and that's got like 60,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and but that being said, it is a foodie town. Like service, hospitality. I think that I'd have to check the James Beard because every year they are always adding new people in Maine that have either been nominated or have won the award. The culinary scene is off the hook. It's amazing.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's so what has happened over the last 10, 15 years is you had all these chefs
Mhm.
that wanted to raise families that studied under great chefs in New York, Boston, Paris, right? And they had some tie to Maine. They either came to camp here, their parents or their grandparents had a camp here, right? There's all this ties, or they just like were fed up with living in big city, and you couple that with great seafood that is right off the dock in the working waterfront of Portland, and then in the 60s and 70s, like where I live, there's all these little communal farms,
Yeah.
so that produce farm to table, stuff, meat and cheeses and stuff. And you combine that with great chefs, it's amazing, the culinary scene.
Wow. Candidly, I did not even know that. That definitely makes sense that I mean, you have large metropolitan areas around you, like Boston, New York. I know you mentioned maybe some European chefs coming in. I think that's incredible. And also, like, isn't there large ports in Maine as well? I'd imagine there's probably a lot of fishing, a lot of fresh seafood, and things like that that's happening in your state too.
Oh yeah, there's a buddy of mine owns a seafood place down in South Portland, and he gets amazing straight off the boat, bluefin tuna, and cod and haddock, and the lobsters, is what we're known for. But it's the oyster scene is off the hook. Oysters and beer, like that's the combo. That's the new thing now, up and down Route One.
I was gonna say, I think are there quite a few craft breweries there in Maine as well?
There is some great beer. Well, you got Allagash, you got Maine Beer Company, you
Allagash,
have
yeah.
Good Fire. I'd be miffed to not mention the place that I work at, which is Brickyard Hollow, uh, which is a great little establishment in Yarmouth.
So tell me, you moved to Maine, you love the great outdoors, you got into mapping. How'd you get into the food business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was at Delorme, I realized that there was a thing called email, and I was working harder from a sales perspective than I really should have been,
Mhm.
smiling and dialing. And I was like, well, why aren't we using email to drive this message? And I was selling paper maps to outdoor retailer shops. And so I said, let's start an email program. So fast forward, I got bit by the email bug, ended up working for a startup, 4 people, 2 dogs. We were an email service provider. We built some software, and the owner of the company decided to sell it.
Okay.
He sold it to a gentleman named Scott Shaw. Scott Shaw started Fishbowl Marketing, which was did restaurant email marketing,
Okay.
And you think about the name Fishbowl, right? You put your information in a fishbowl to win free lunch. You now send them a welcome birthday and anniversary via email.
Mm-hmm.
And right, the reach is big. And as we've seen over the last, 15, 18 years now, email still returns the highest return on investment.
Yeah.
Right. And so he needed a platform to help him transition from an agency to a software company. And so I got acquired into this space. I didn't know anything about restaurants. I
Wow.
never worked in a restaurant before this. And the wonderful part of it is that I was selling to travel, hospitality, and hotels and stuff. So I knew, of restaurants and stuff, but I was surrounded by really, really smart people that were just industry veterans that took me under their wing and taught me about the space. And it was amazing. And so I was never really, I guess everybody says they kind of fumble into restaurant space. I definitely fumble. I was acquired into this space and haven't left since. Everything I've done in my career has been tied to restaurants or hospitality in some way.
And tell me about, is it Voosh?
Yes, Voosh.
So tell me about, did you start that company, or this is one of the companies that you were acquired into?
No, so I would consider myself a startup junkie,
Okay.
and I love building something from scratch, and taking something, the idea in this case, helping restaurant operators understand third-party delivery,
Okay.
which is an enigma right now for them, but a huge opportunity. And crafting a sales marketing strategy and a plan, and then executing on it. And that's what we're doing here at Voosh. It's really, I get to put on a cape every day and help restaurant operators, really tackle this, $700 million gorilla that's in front of them.
So a restaurant signs up with Voosh, and what would they expect from signing up with your company?
Yeah, well, clarity is
Okay.
probably the first thing. Clarity into how their channels are doing. So you think about third party, Uber, Grubhub, DoorDash, all silos, all different systems. They don't talk to each other. The way they report on promotions, ads, or reviews are completely different. So centralizing that and making it consistent from a P&L perspective, and then giving tools to be able to do promotions better, to be able to plug leaky holes like the dispute problem, and then review management, and then understanding downtime so that you can make sure that your shop is up and running when it needs to be.
And are you helping restaurants all across the country, or is it just in Maine?
No, it's globally. We
Okay.
help restaurant groups in Europe as well as here in the United States, from big restaurant groups to small little SMBs.
Wow. Man, I'm always fascinated. There's so many great entrepreneurs within the food business, and there's so many different ways to make money, as I like to say, in this industry. You just have to kind of pick one. And on this podcast, I've had people that are in sales, I've had people that are in operations, finance, PR, like all different scopes. And so it's really cool and refreshing to talk to somebody that, you're on the data side, you're on the technology and innovation side, helping restaurants. I think that's really cool of what you're doing. When you look at your overall business, you mentioned the number 700 million. Is that the total addressable market that you feel that's there for Voosh? Or do you think it's bigger than that, smaller than that? What do you think?
Yeah, so the addressable market's it's huge. It's
Yeah, it's
definitely
got to be.
that's the problem. So the big problem right now that the immediate problem that we're solving is disputes. So restaurants, or let me back up a minute. DoorDash, Uber, and Grubhub have made the decision that they pass 100% of the fault of a problem with an order
Okay.
back on the operator. Now, they get away with this by providing tools for operators to say, hey, it wasn't my fault, to file a claim. Now, restaurants, they don't have time, right? They're, understaffed, have a lot of challenges going on that, or fires they're trying to put out. And adding this or adding management of these DSPs just becomes another thing for them to do. And, then on top of not really having consistent functional tools to be able to do it, and it's a $700 million problem. It's 1 to 2% on top of the commission that they are taking from these operators. That could be the difference between being profitable and not being profitable.
Yeah.
And operators are trying to juggle this. Like, on one side they say DSPs are evil, but then they know they need to be in this because that's where the consumer is.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we help them with is filing those claims. We automate the process of filing those claims so that they can get their money back, based on, it being ingredient errors or it being canceled orders.
I had an example just a couple weeks ago. My wife and I, we ordered takeout, not takeout, delivery to our place, and it's from a great little Mexican place by where I live, and they're always right on it. Like the food's great, and so we order every week for the most part, if not every other week. And this last time when we ordered, we received, there's two of us, and we only received one meal. We called back the DoorDash driver, and the DoorDash driver said that, well, you have to call the operator. It's their fault. They didn't give me the food. So then I call the operator, and the operator says, well, it's not our fault. We did, I'm not sure what you're talking about. So there was this kind of disconnect as to ultimately, we had to get the refund, whether it was the driver or the operator. The operator had to create the refund, but they put themselves in a position to get, a negative review potentially online. We're not in the business of giving negative reviews because we love food service, but not everybody thinks like that. And that could you get enough of those negative reviews and that can hurt your business, whether it's your fault or not.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. There's the trickle down effects of it, and it hurts where you are then in the rankings from an SEO perspective. So
Sure.
there's economic um, returns that won't happen if you have too many disputes. And DoorDash, Uber, and Grubhub, they all reward based on different parameters. One being the number of disputes or inaccurate orders, they call it. The other is your rating from a star perspective. So those all take into account based on where you're going to land in somebody's near me search.
Yeah.
Which has direct effects on how much money you're going to generate from these channels.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now I'm just thinking like my business brain is going just based on what you're saying. So you get all of these restaurants signed up, and every day you probably get more of them. So you have all of this data. Have you ever considered selling that data? Because there's definitely people that listen along, manufacturers or other entities out there that would love to have that data to be able to sell those operators products or services or information or whatever it would be. Have you ever thought of something like that?
No, not really, because ultimately it's really about helping that operator, right? Helping
Sure.
them understand their data, so what they're selling within each channel. How can they do this better? How can they do promotions better and ads? It's really about them. And there's a ton of just green field to help operators within this because they're not e-commerce experts, right?
Right.
In the last 4 years, their business has been turned upside down, and now they've become this multi-channel operation, and they're just coming out of really saying, hey, I have to figure this out. And the smart ones are the ones that are saying, okay, I'm diving headfirst into this because that's where the consumer is. I'm seeing 10 to 20, in some cases 30% of my business running through these marketplaces.
Yeah.
How do I lessen the amount of, you know, costs, from, labor to, packaging costs, to utilities and so on. And then add this, 20 to 30%, take rate from the marketplaces. How do I incorporate that into my business and still make money from it, and then um, not create, an ecosystem where then I'm not paying attention to my in-store experience, right? Because
Mm.
they kind of go hand in hand, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think what you're doing is really fascinating. Is there anybody else in the space that's doing something similar to what Voosh is doing?
Yeah, there's a bunch of companies now
Okay,
that in this space, that are helping restaurants and third party, and
sure.
it's really, in the last year it's been totally interesting because this wasn't an identified problem. It's always underlying been there, uh, but because the money wasn't there, right? People were happy with the incremental revenue that third party delivered, and it
Mhm.
was maybe 2 to 10%, right? The smart ones that were, investing in third party, and everybody was focused on, I have to get my first party experience, right? I got to build an app. I have to have my online ordering experience, up to stuff. And slowly what happened, is that the third parties came in and was like, listen, we're going to spend $4 billion on advertising, and we're going to capture the imagination of the consumer. This is no different than what Expedia and Priceline did to hotels.
Yeah.
I mean, the playbook has already been written, and hotels struggled. If you look back on the history, hotels struggled, and they still struggle today to balance between their first party experience and the third party experience that they've put a lot of effort, like price changes and management of it. And you think about the fragmentation of corporate and franchisees. It's same applies the same in hotels as it does within the restaurant space. So it's unfortunate, but it's fortunate because there is a way to make money in these third parties, and that's what we're helping operators do.
You made an interesting point about the hotel business going to, other third parties to where, essentially the hotel guest will book through booking.com or whatever it may, Expedia, whatever it may be. Because then it takes control away from the hotel or the owner or the manager, whoever it is at the hotel of booking those reservations and kind of having to manage that. And yeah, we are seeing it here now in food service. I think COVID has probably brought a lot of that to the forefront as well in a very fast way. Because before COVID, I mean, I would never use DoorDash or Uber Eats. I don't even know, in terms of how prevalent they were. I mean, I can't really remember back to 2019 and prior to that, but they've really taken over. And I know that it is a struggle for restaurants and looking at their margins. Margins in the food service business or in the restaurant business are already pretty small. And now
Yeah,
you have, takeout and delivery services on top of that. It makes it even harder. If you look at I always like to point to like the clothing industry. You go to Nordstrom's, what percentage of their business the consumer doesn't walk in the front door anymore. They get it directly delivered to their home. And so
yeah.
that adoption's in food service as well, where people just heck, my wife and I, we do it. It's the convenience of having food delivered to us. Well, I don't want to get up off the couch. I just worked all day. I'd rather spend an extra X amount of dollars to have the food delivered to me and stay in front of my television, you know? So
Well,
it's really interesting.
so you couple that with the next generation that's coming up.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
This younger generation, the Gen Zs, the Gen Ys, right? They're digitally native,
Hmm.
and all they know is, I can push a couple buttons on a phone and something then gets delivered to me. And
Hmm.
it's totally like they're okay with that. Like it's that convenience factor. Like I always bring up this occurrence. So my son, he's 15 years old, and he ordered a Monster Energy drink on DoorDash. Now, mind you, we only live like 10 minutes down the road. He could have asked his brother to go for a ride, and to, he would have been more than happy to take him. But he ordered it, had it delivered, and he
Yeah,
paid, whatever the delivery fee is, and whatever the cost of the Monster Energy drink was. And he had no problem with it.
that's right.
I had a big problem with it because it doesn't make sense to me. But I think that just highlights that, like, we're at this crossroads of a different consumer. So we have a habit that we've created over the last 3 years of convenience, being an older generation or older population, and you have this younger generation that it's just common for them. That's what they know. That's what they do.
Yeah, and so you're helping restaurants really bridge that gap. Probably to the consumers that are, in the older population that are using third party apps, but then this wave of a new generation that they're all going to use it, or not all, but a large majority of them will most likely be on those apps.
Yeah, they're going to be on these apps, and DoorDash and Uber and Grubhub know this, and that's why they're spending billions of dollars on the advertising for acquisition and retention. It's why they have their loyalty programs. I learned about a new one the other day where DoorDash has like a college
Hmm.
pass, and this college pass free delivery, and you get secret discounts and whatnot. But it makes sense from a business perspective and what they're trying to do, and have many tentacles out there. You know, they're in the data game. They're not in the food service business. They're not in
Yeah.
they're not really in the delivery business. They're in the data business.
Yeah. So, with all of that said, now I'm not saying that you're a fortune teller. However, or
Hmm.
not a fortune teller, a someone who can see into the future. Based on your background in data, technology, innovation, looking at the future of the food service business or the restaurant industry, whatever you want to call it, what other disruptions might we see in the future? Anything that you see on the forefront that maybe whether it's DoorDash, Uber Eats, or maybe other companies might start to do to disrupt how it's being done here today?
Yeah, I think loyalty is going to have a renaissance
Okay.
in the next 3 years. A couple of reasons. One, I think there's some really good platforms out there. I think that the customer data platforms and how people are thinking about loyalty, right? Loyalty is a feeling. It's not a points or
Hmm.
earned rewards, right? It could be many things, um, but it's what the guest feel, how they feel about a brand. And I think, data could absolutely help with that. And I think restaurants today have the tools in front of them. Now, what they need is good people and smart people to help them move it to the forefront. And I think there's some really smart people that are, behind a lot of these platforms. But I think loyalty will have a renaissance because of the other side of it is because it's a down economy, and
Hmm.
loyalty has been proven that if you get people into a database and you keep them aware about what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it. It doesn't have to be couponing or anything like that, but awareness, fun, right? People will choose your brand over another brand, right? People still go out to eat. People have to eat 3 meals a day
That's right.
regardless, right? Now, will they, downsize, right? Will they, choose a quick service versus a casual dine? Yeah, I think we're seeing those in the numbers. But that's the opportunity for the marketing team to come in and really hone in on what loyalty means to the brand and what it means to the customer base. So I think when I look in the crystal ball, um, I do see this whole delivery network. So you have companies like Delivered and Burke, right, that are last mile delivery platforms, and
Hmm.
I think you'll start to see those start to take a little bit more traction, or I'd like to see them take more traction away from you know um, the DoorDashes, Ubers. right? I think they just offer better service. They
Yeah.
understand the space a little bit more. So I think those two things would be what I'd like to see, happen. And I think there's writing on the wall for sure.
Yeah. I've never heard of Delivered or Burke.
Yeah, cool little platforms, that are really doing some interesting things, like from a catering. I mean, everybody's hot on catering too, um,
Oh.
which is interesting to me because I just think of the remote worker and there's still a large percentage of remote workers, and maybe they're in the office 3 times a day,
Mhm.
or right, you have the hybrid, um, and so I only time will tell of if catering is back or not. I know a lot of brands are making the push back into it. Um, I don't know. I'm not sold yet. I have to,
Yeah.
see how the population works out.
What about for you? What do you still want to accomplish in your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I want to, this industry's given me a lot,
Sure.
and I love this industry. I love the people in it. I love helping operators understand what technology they need and how it can help them. So the knowledge share is huge for me. So a lot of that's continuing to innovate, bringing good solutions to the market, helping them understand how they benefit them, um, and just enjoying the people.
Yeah.
Uh, surrounding myself with my tribe, and
Amazing.
you know doing what we do best in hospitality, which is put a smile on everybody's face.
That's right. Well, Chris, I appreciate it, man. This has been really great. Thanks for so much for coming on the podcast. And man, I learned so much. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, Nick, having me, and look forward to seeing you out there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks.
You're gonna come to Maine, right?
I do need to go to Maine. I've been to 25 states, I think. And every year I surprise myself. Last year I'd never been to Minnesota. I never thought I'd go to Minnesota. I went last November. Let's see. This year, I don't think I have any new states that I've been to this year, but I would love to go to Maine, and I'll let you know when I do.
Absolutely. I will. You will be taken on the culinary tour.
I love it. I'm in for that, man. That sounds good to me.
Right on.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, take it easy.